Welcome to episode 6 of Channel Legendarium. Today we'll be talking about how Zeus became king of the gods. We're going to begin with Kronos and Rhea, Zeus's parents. Kronos, fearing that his children would one day replace him, ate them. His wife Rhea disapproved of this, so she deceived him and sent one of his children, baby Zeus, off to an island to be raised where he would be safe from his father. On that island, Zeus came of age and later returned to his father's seat to free his brothers and sisters from captivity in their father's stomach. And with their help, Zeus won supreme power over both heaven and earth. In order to understand Zeus, you first need to understand his father, Kronos. Now, Kronos had seized power from his own father, the sky god Uranus. Now, then Kronos proceeded to marry one of his sisters, Rhea, as there was no one else at the time. And with their other brothers and sisters, the Titans, they ruled over the earth during the first age described in Greek mythology, the Golden Age. This was described as a time when mortal men who lived under the rule of the Titans had no cares. Bread grew from the trees, wine flowed in the rivers, there was nothing to worry about. Unless, of course, you happened to be one of Kronos' children. Remember, Kronos had seized power from his father by violence, and he feared that one of his children would do the same. So he came up with a simple solution. He ate them. Now this shows us two great fears of the ancient Greece. Number one, patricide. If you lived in ancient Greece, the father controlled everything, specifically the family property. So if you were one of the sons, you didn't have anything until the father died. And this created a great double fear in ancient Greece. On the one hand, fathers feared that their sons might murder them to possess what they had. And on the other hand, sons feared that they would be forced to commit the terrible crime of patricide so that they could become men in their own right instead of just following their father's wishes. This also brings in a second great fear, cannibalism. The ancient Greeks considered cannibalism to be the absolute worst of crimes. If they wanted to tar a people as barbarians, they called them cannibals. One of the reasons for this is that the ancient Greeks believed that the body needed to be preserved for funeral rites so it could be sent to the next world intact. Rhea was forced to feed her husband 5 of her children: Demeter, Poseidon, Hera, Hestia, and Hades. Eventually she got tired of watching her children be eaten, so when baby Zeus was born, she wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth. Now, Kronos may have been strong, but he wasn't very bright. Not noticing that the baby was not moving and not crying, he simply ate the stone in the swaddling cloth. Now, this shows us a third part of ancient Greek life. The ancient Greeks believed that wit was superior to strength, that the smart could defeat the strong. So while Kronos got a stomach ache, clever Rhea sent her son off to the island of Crete, where he would be safe until he was big enough to face his father. Zeus spent his earliest days inside one of the caves of Crete. Later on, the caves of Crete would become centers of worship for ancient Greeks. In some versions of the story, Rhea herself raised Zeus on the island. In other versions, she gave the job to sea nymphs while she remained with her husband. In any case, the women hid the cries of the baby Zeus by banging shields together, thus keeping his father from hearing him. This is why many shields in ancient Greece had the faces of Zeus carved on them to honor the women who protected the king of the gods when he could not protect himself. Zeus grew to manhood, hearing of how his 5 brothers and sisters were still in Kronos' stomach. Because they were immortal, his 5 siblings remained alive despite being trapped inside that fleshy prison. So Zeus, being Zeus, left his island home to challenge his father. However, like his mother, he did so with wit instead of strength. He slipped into his father's palace disguised as a servant and gave him a potion which made Kronos violently ill. Kronos first threw up the stone, which he mistook for baby Zeus. Later on, that stone would become part of the temple complex at Delphi, home to the famous oracle. However, more important for the story, he threw up Zeus's 5 siblings. He banded them together and took them to his court at Mount Olympus. There he pledged himself and his brothers and sisters to overthrow his father and his Titan followers. It's worth noting that Zeus was playing for huge stakes. If he won, he would become the godly king of Olympus, ruler of both gods and men. However, if he lost, he would go to Hades, the ancient Greek version of hell. So, being a smart man, Zeus decided to go get some help. First, he got aid from the 100-handers, a race of people who had 100 hands, as the name would suggest, and 50 heads. I can only imagine they were a terror in melee combat. In addition, Zeus sought help from Kronos' brothers, the Cyclops. The Cyclops hated Kronos because he imprisoned them in caves while he lived it up in the palace so they wouldn't challenge him. As you can see, Kronos was obsessed with keeping his power. Zeus promised the Cyclops that he would do justice to them, freeing them from the cave if he won. The Cyclops, impressed both by Zeus's strength and his justice, gave him the power of lightning, which he apparently just had lying around. Zeus trained himself to use the lightning bolt. He taught himself to ride a winged Pegasus while throwing lightning bolts, and he even trained an eagle to fly back to Earth and fetch them for him. Now, Zeus and his siblings fought the Titans and their father Kronos for 10 years. Now, as you can see, the gods had both strength and wit, while the Titans only had strength. Indeed, the ancient Greeks saw the Titans a bit like how Christians saw Goliath, as depicted in the Bible. Very big and very strong, but not very smart. So it's not surprising that the gods ultimately won after a period of strife that the poet Hesiod described as storms battling each other in the sky and mountains ripping themselves up by their stony roots so they could fight to decide whether Titans or the Olympian gods would rule the earth. And of course, the gods won. The Titans were punished in a number of ways. One Titan fell into the sea, died, and became the island of Sicily, which tells you just how big the ancient Greeks believed them to be. The most famous of them, Atlas, was sentenced to hold the sky over his head for all eternity, until the Greek hero Perseus came by with Medusa's head and ended his suffering by turning him to stone. In time, Zeus would show his justice again not only by sending Kronos to Tartarus, where Zeus would have gone had he lost the war, but later forgiving his father and making him the king of Elysium. It's worth noting that the ancient Greeks continued to honor Kronos with annual festivals, because they saw him, even though he was an evil god, still a god who ought to be worshipped. Indeed, in Rhodes, they celebrated him with human sacrifices. So that's the story of how Zeus became king of the gods. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.